And now to East Africa, where the death toll from weeks of relentless rain and floods in Kenya has climbed to 228 as authorities warn of continued crisis condition. Despite escaping major damage from tropical cyclone that weakened after hitting land, Kenya and neighboring Tanzania are still grappling with torrential downpours and the looming threat of further floods and landslides. In western Kenya, the river Nyado overflowed early on Sunday, overwhelming a police station, school, hospital and market in Ahero, Kisumu County. While there are no immediate reports of casualties, local police caution that water levels are still rising, with the main bridge outside Kisumu along Nairobi Highway submerged. The region has been besieged by weeks of heavier than usual seasonal rains, worsened by the El Nino weather pattern, wreaking havoc across East Africa. And to unpack this, I'm joined by a climate change consultant, Nancy Omolo. Good evening. Glad to have you join me.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me in this station.
Now, reports indicate that death toll has now risen to 228 as a result of the flood. What else is happening that we don't know
of? Thank you so much. It's a very sad moment, and I would like to convey my condolences to the affected people. So far, the government of Kenya, as of yesterday, had reported around 228 people who have been killed by the floods. And these are the floods which are affecting almost all parts of the country. This is Nyando. This is the Athi rivers, which has burst. And also we have Masai Mara. So it's almost in various parts of the country, but the numbers could be higher than what we have. And beyond that, we also have people who have been reported missing, which are over hundreds, maybe now heading to 200. We have around 150,000 people. So maybe now it's maybe heading to 200, because yesterday alone 600 people were displaced. And some of them are at the camps. The government has actually set up camps in schools in different parts of the country. But some people have also gone to their relatives. So maybe the people who have gone to stay with the relatives are not being counted as the people who are in the camp. And generally, we've had the destruction of the infrastructure. Some trains are not able to operate. The buses are not moving around. Cars have been swept away. The crops in the farms have also been swept away. So we're also looking at a place where we are going to have food insecurity because crops have been swept away. We are looking at a situation whereby we can have outbreak of malaria and also outbreak of other diseases which are related to water-related diseases, because many pipes have been swept away.
Quite a number of impacts this flood would have. But do you think there are certain factors responsible for these flood that has claimed lives?
Generally, we're talking about climate change, because with the climate change, we've actually predicted more increase in floods and droughts, because just before the floods, we had really intensive droughts whereby most communities did not have water for their livestock. And now we're also having the floods, which has come with a lot of destruction. So actually in climate, we call them, these are climate extremes, whereby if the rain comes, it's destructive. When the temperatures are too high, and the drought is also very extensive. So these are things which have been predicted, and even the El Nino was predicted. The only difference is that we didn't expect it. The government did not expect that this is going to be very intensive. It has happened before in some last decades, but they did not see how intensive it's going to be. And it's not only Kenya which is affected. Tanzania is affected, Burundi is affected, and even Tanzania, Burundi, Ethiopia, we've seen these floods affecting Brazil. We've also seen them affecting a country like Dubai. So it's not very specific to Kenya only.
Just to follow up on what you said about climate change, we know at times certain activities or behaviors of people contributes to flood incidents. So would you say this is a human factor or just an act of nature?
I think it's a combination. You know, when we have increased population and people are building, you know, some of them are, we can say that is human nature, because like there are some areas, the riparian areas, for example, in Kenya, we saw floods affecting Nairobi, and people have built very close to the river. So when we had River Athi burst its bank, we find a lot of houses, and these are the middle class, they were flooded and people could not come out of their houses and they had to be rescued. We saw also in some low-income areas where people have just built next to the rivers. So actually, the government is actually warning people, and it gave people 48 hours to evacuate if you're living next to these riparian areas. So we can say that to a certain extent, we have some of them are because of the human action, but some of them are also the nature, because sometimes it's not raining in your place, but because, for example, Lake Victoria has received so much rainfall and has moved backwards, then you find River Nyando bursting its banks. Or sometimes you're also in Masai Mara, whereby, you know, this is a touristic area whereby it was really affected, lots of hotels were swept away. So it's both human nature, some of them it's related to human activities, but some of them is also the nature. And considering that this is a global issue and it's not just a Kenyan issue. But what is important is that, you know, how are our governments prepared to deal with this kind of situations?
In fact, I was going to go
even
there,
if they tell
Nancy.
people.
Just to chip in there, Nancy, talking about the government, I was going to ask you, you took the word right out of my mouth. I know you talked about the government setting up camps for people affected by the floods. You also talked about warning people, the government warning people to evacuate these areas prone to floods. But then when it comes to preventing future occurrences, what has been the response of from authorities or the governments, like you said?
I think scientists, you know, these are research which we've done, and we've actually predicted that in the next 30, 40 years, this occurrence, the climate extremes are going to be much more frequent. But most of the time, I don't think the government take it really seriously and plan ahead, because what we're seeing is kind of reactions. For example, when you tell people to evacuate their homes or go to, high areas, I mean, and you've not prepared anything for them. So basically, when people are being evacuated from their homes, they're going to the nearest schools. And this nearest schools is just simple classroom. So you find that mothers, children, even the men are sharing the same classroom. They do not have even cooking facilities. And, even access to the toilet is not so good. And some people are on medication. You have people of different ages. So you find that there's no really proper preparations. And even now, schools were on holiday and they're supposed to reopen a week ago. So now the government has closed schools indefinitely, because if children were to go back to school, where these people were displaced going to stay and where the children going to learn, and also considering that some schools are also flooded and some of the bridges cannot go. So I think there need to be much more awareness. We need to have, we have devolved 47 counties in the country. And so far we can't say that any country is prepared, maybe like it has evacuation centers, maybe it has got certain marks, because when you visit countries like Bangladesh, they put those things in place because this is a country which is always prepared to deal with floods. If you look like countries like Dubai, because they have much more resources, and even their level of preparedness is much higher. So the government still needs to do a lot. It needs to take the early warning seriously, and also there needs to be sensitization at the local level. A country like Kenya, we've done a lot of sensitization to farmers when it comes to for example, we're saying we're going to receive long rains. So instead of planting maize, maybe plant beans. So
Nancy,
giving that information is been developed from national to county level, especially to the farmers, livestock keepers, to the fisher folks. But really, we've not put in place systems to evacuate people in terms of this, like such calamities of floods.
Indeed, Nancy, we hope the government hits the core to create more awareness about flood in Kenya. Thank you so much for your time on the news. Nancy Omolo, climate change consultant. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. Bye.